2 and 8 players and compete for up to 325 times your entry. Use code DIRECTOR when signing up to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Go to Bolt Fam, it's the Director. Chargers fans, you feeling refreshed? I know the Chargers sure are, man. Look at it. We got Junior Colson back out there. I saw Dayan Henley. Of course, Justin Herbert looks a lot better. We got both of the tackles back. The Joe Waltz, the Rashawn Slaters. You got Derwin back, all smiles. You got Joey Bosa practicing today. Hey, for what was, at first, a very annoying early bye week, this really came in and saved our butts, man. The Week 5 bye gave the Chargers an opportunity to bounce back from a ton of injuries. You're going to see a ton of injuries on the injury report this week, but I promise you, it's mostly good news. And we're going to need them this week, man. This week versus the Denver Broncos, who I'm going to say right now, sneaky good. Okay, this team maybe being slept on a little bit. The defense of the Broncos has been pretty impressive. The Chargers trying to figure out their offense, but their defense also looking really good. It should be another one of those rough, tough, defensive-oriented football games that in the end are starting to become one of my favorite, at least as a Chargers fan. Jesse Minter has been a phenomenal add for this team this season, and they're really going to put Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos through the works this week. So before we do kick things off, man, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Underdog at this point, right? Yeah, I think we're going straight up to Underdog now. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit, or I should say to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Newcomers definitely take advantage of this free pick. Joe Burrow. If you guys aren't using the free picks or whatever the promo picks on top, you're doing Underdog wrong. I've had a lot of success there. And also, if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, I more often than not will post my picks. I got a pretty big one coming up this week for the Chargers if you guys want to tail along. Should be a lot of fun. Before we do kick things off, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. The small amount of time you guys take to the like, sub, bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it, baby. Lights, camera, action.
Who's got it better than us?
Into the end zone, Charger fans are witnesses to history!
Your Chargers at Broncos game preview, a game that's actually pretty important. The Broncos are generating a little bit of heat lately, right? That defense has looked awesome. Their offense is coming into their own. I don't know, man. The Broncos, again, starting to sneak up a little bit, and I think some people are starting to notice. The Chargers, on the other hand, have been on a bye week. Not a lot of terms of hype right now because of their loss off of, Kansas City a couple of weeks back. Of course, they had a tough time facing the Steelers a week before that as well. The Chargers now, though, have an opportunity to start building some momentum off of that bye week, which is going to be pretty important. And honestly, the kind of team that the Chargers are right now, I wouldn't be shocked if this was the beginning of a run for Jim Harbaugh and the Bolts, having reevaluated a lot of things in offense and defense and getting guys back from injury. Should be interesting. So before we do get into the thick of things, I do want to go over the laundry list that is the Chargers injury report. Now, let me say this on the surface, okay? And this is something I've been saying a lot this season. Don't let the number of names on the injury report intimidate you, especially now in the Jim Harbaugh era. I've talked to many Michigan fans. I've talked to guys, beat writers and stuff for Michigan Wolverines in the Jim Harbaugh era. This is very normal, especially considering that we also have the strength and conditioning coach from Michigan in Ben Herbert. You're going to see a lot of overabundance of caution, a lot of guys on the injury report, a lot of guys working through something where in the end, it's a precaution, right? A precautionary measure. And you're going to see a lot of names on here that are for sure going to be playing on Sunday. Again, they're just kind of being extra careful by adding their names to these lists, getting them checked out. Ben Herbert wants to make everybody tougher to break. There's a process to that, okay? So to start at the top of this list, though, we have some big names that the Chargers are going to be welcoming back this week. huge implications to how this is going to affect their season going forward, and hopefully, knock on wood, the beginning of them staying on the field more often than not. Let's start at the top here with Joe Alt. We saw this guy in practice early. He looks awesome. He looks ready to go. He got a full practice in on Thursday. Of course, we don't have the Friday results quite yet, but that's a really good sign that Joe Alt is indeed back. And if you guys watched my video earlier this week, I mentioned how the Chargers' different position groups are, more or less important, especially in comparison to other clubs in the NFL. The Chargers' offensive line position is a huge emphasis for this team as a whole. Jim Harbaugh calls it the tip of the spear for the offense, and it's very true. When the Chargers are having problems on the offensive line, it really is a very difficult obstacle for them to overcome. Some would even argue the offensive line for the Chargers even more important than the quarterback position. Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater being absent in the last game was very evident of that, right? The Chargers really difficult time getting things going on through the run. That's definitely going to be their biggest point of emphasis on offense. The pass protection just wasn't there. Just felt like a really tough break for the Chargers last week, where if they did have their offensive line, maybe they do overcome that one-score deficit versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Now this week, Joe Alt coming back, huge implications in the run game, huge implications in pass pro. It's going to be awesome to see this guy back. Next up, Joey Bosa. He's not practiced up to this point, but just before filming this video, I did notice Daniel Popper posting that he is practicing, I think even limited in individual drills or something like that. There is a chance, I would say, Joey Bosa comes back, but again, he's in a position group that's so deep, not a huge deal if he misses this one. Chargers still have an awesome big three in Thule and Mack and Bud Dupree that can handle things and hold down the fort until then. Another full practice coming in from Junior Colson. This one's pretty huge. Chargers linebackers saw a big hit the last game. Dan Henley was gone. I think Denzel was beat up. Junior Colson wasn't there. This is actually a pretty huge position for the Chargers defense. Seeing Junior Colson back, very good sign. Cam Dicker, had an illness. He looks to be back. A big one that we're going to talk about later in the video, though, is Gus Edwards, who hasn't been practicing this week. There's something going on with that ankle. May open up an opportunity for a rookie to step in and get some snaps this week. We'll talk more about that soon. Christian Fulton got a full practice. And again, guys, this is what I want you to pay attention to. Did not practice, Wednesday, gets the full practice in on Thursday. Feels very precautionary. You're going to see a lot of stuff like that. Even with the limited practices. Dan Henley, limited Wednesday, full practice on Thursday. Looks really good now. Justin Herbert looking good. Let's see any other big names here. Derwin James, he had been sitting some personal time off here, but he's coming back from the suspension last week. That's huge. Khalil Mack again also resting. He should be playing great this week. Asante Samuel gets the full practice in. Rashawn Slater's getting limited practice in. It feels like Rashawn's going to play, if I'm being honest with you guys. He looks pretty good in practice this week. And then Jasir Taylor not practicing. He may actually be one that does sit out. But again, you take a look at the huge number of players on this list. The only guys that I'm kind of like, I'm pretty sure they're not playing is probably going to be Jasir Taylor, maybe Gus Edwards, and Joey Bosa. Everybody else, I think, has a really good shot, and that's just the way the injury report is going to work this year. An overabundance of caution that's, going to freak out the fan base, myself included. But on the other end of things, it's going to make it more difficult for the opponent. It's an advantage, right? The Chargers are taking advantage of it. It's an advantage for themselves that maybe not super convenient for us, the fans, is just the way they do things in the Jim Harbaugh management, okay? Now, as for the Broncos, I would say more or less these guys are going to play. Some of the guys to take note of, though, are Josh Reynolds. They have this tackle, Palkowski or whatever. All I know is I think this guy was like the second or third string right tackle, if I'm not mistaken. He's probably not going to play, that puts them at their fourth string tackle. I don't know what the situation looks like for the Broncos on that offensive line, but that center, that tackle, it's going to make things interesting for the Chargers and their awesome pass rush coming into Denver this Sunday. All right, so let's move on to our first talking point. A bit longer on the injury report, but I feel like at least in the early games, the first half of the season, I really need to try and hit home with you guys that we're going to see a lot of names every week, but it's very, very precautionary. That's kind of part of the plan out with the Chargers. All right. The first thing I want to make everyone aware of with this game, as Chargers fans, and this is something that I had to kind of discover for myself as well, come to accept for myself as well, the Broncos are no slouch this season. Okay, you take a look at the schedule early on. You're like, hey, there's an automatic dub right there. You got yourself a disaster of the Broncos from last season. They were all sorts of disarray. They got a rookie quarterback in there. There's a lot to prove. Well, there's been some time since then, and I would say they've developed into a pretty a decent identity, at least for right now, that could continue to grow. The identity for the Broncos, for me at least, very good defense, something that we're not unfamiliar with, at least in my time as a Chargers fan. Denver's always had a pretty great defense. They've got a budding star, I'll say, like the signs of a star in Bo Nix. Like, he's starting to look a little bit better each week, but they still have a lot of problems on that offense. Funny enough, very reflective of where the Chargers are at right now. And then also sitting at a 3-2 record, kind of sitting very similar to what the Chargers are as a team, kind of establishing themselves. Both teams have really reputable head coaches, Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh. They're both kind of in the middle of building something, but they're also finding some momentum in the season. Kind of similar to our matchup with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're kind of seeing two teams with very similar mindsets, similar identities, similar systems. Not even systems, but the way they operate in terms of rough and tough. You're kind of seeing a lot of similarities in both of those teams, which again lends me to tell you guys, we got to be careful in this game. Chargers aren't going to walk in and dance all over the Broncos this week. It's going to be a tough fought match for the Bolts, especially for a team that, is coming off of a lot of uncertainty before the bye week. What's going on with Justin Herbert? The offense is all over the place. Defense is the only thing with the Chargers that really looks locked and loaded and ready to go, which is going to help us tremendously in this week. But Denver, again, they've kind of been on the rise. The defense has been really good, especially versus the pass, I'll say. Bo Nix is heating up. Nothing crazy, but he's getting the job done. They're 3-2. They're showing competitiveness. It's going to be interesting. But remember, the Chargers, again, also kind of slept on. If you're a Broncos fan watching this for whatever reason, don't sleep on the Chargers neither, man. This team, similarly, we are slept on as well. We're boasting the best defense in football right now, only allowing 12.5 points per game. It's going to be a defensive slugfest out there, man. It really is. So my first point for the Chargers, though, that I will say, again, kind of alluded in the injury report segment, the return of the Iron Pillars. We got to come up with a name for these guys, man. This is definitely the best pair of Chargers tackles I've ever seen as a Chargers fan. What are we calling these dudes, man? The Iron Pillars, the electric rods of Zeus. I don't know. You guys help me out in the comment section. We'll come up with something fun, right? These guys are both back, and like I mentioned in the injury report segment, this is a massive deal for this team. Okay, the last time the Chargers played Kansas City, you could tell night and day what this team looks like with those tackles and without those tackles. I think on one side, right, Chargers do have a fairly newish line. They have a lot of chemistry they're trying to build. Duke Merriweather came on Twitter and said, hey, you know what? It takes 6 to 10 weeks for a new line to develop anyway. It's going to be tough out there, right? But you also had a lot of guys not playing the right position. I think Pip was at tackle. You had, Sawyer at tackle as well. You had guys in the interior that I'd never heard of, and Mustafar, I have the high ground. You know what I mean, right? It was just kind of a mess out there. And the Chargers and the offense, which had seen some success versus Carolina, obviously, and Vegas, who should not be slept on either, was not seeing the same success without those pillars on the offensive line. Very important position for this team. And luckily for the Chargers, at least for right now, again, knock on wood that it stays this way, it feels like the tackles are back. Joe Alt, I didn't know how long he would be out. Luckily, we had ourselves that bye week. It looks like he's going to be back for this game, certainly. It looks very good, I'll say. Not a certainty, but very good for Rashawn Slater to be back this game, too. You can do so many more things when you've got both of these guys, or even one of these guys on the field. That's what was kind of crazy. I was like last week, even if, Rashawn Slater was out, if we had Joe Alt, it would have been a much different story in the run game. It really would have. You guys got to go back and look at some of the snaps for J.K. Dobbins behind this guy, man. My God. Some of his biggest games for J.K. Dobbins this season have been very much so helped by Joe Alt and the space that he's creating on the outside. Very, very happy to have both these guys back. Obviously, they're going to help you out in the passing game, too. Joe Alt is everything is advertised. Sure, the light or the attention's being stolen by the skill position players like Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, even some of the DBs out there. But Joe Alt, man, sneakily one of the best rookies in this class, is back for this game. And it's really going to help the Chargers out in a week where I think they're really going to have to hit things hard on the ground. And I think he's going to be a big part of that. Joe Alt, welcome back to the lineup, as well as Rashawn Slater. Let's not forget that. Rashawn Slater, one of the best left tackles statistically in football, one of the best pass protectors out there. I've seen some of the biggest runs for J.K. Dobbins this season off of some of the space created, even on the left side, by Rashawn Slater. That's one big advantage you have if you're a Chargers fan on that offensive line. Is not only do you have two insanely powerful tackles on each end of that line, but they're also extremely athletic. So you pair that up with a really good running back that is also got the nimbleness and the shiftiness and the vision. Like you're creating a really good situation for your run game. All right, let's move on. Very stoked about the offensive line, but we have to move on. Next up, Justin Herbert. Now, this segment's going to be different for the Chargers fans in this video, okay? I'm going to say Justin Herbert is going to be on a revenge tour. I've seen Justin Herbert this season extremely frustrated with the fact that the team is maybe coming off to a bit of a slow start. You're trying to establish yourself in the Jim Harbaugh era. He's been injured more often than not. It's been a rough go for Justin Herbert. Let's say even dating back into like the middle of last season. It's been tough for this guy. He started off so hot, rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year, one of the best quarterbacks in football, now kind of trying to grab his footing again. I think it's going to start a little bit in this game, but I have to emphasize that I don't expect it to be the biggest game for Justin Herbert, at least this week, but it's the beginning of a little bit of consistency, a little bit of footing for him, a little bit of confidence in this week. It's a division opponent. He's been more or less pretty good versus the Broncos in his history. Of course, the last couple of matchups haven't been great, but I would say Justin Herbert has the capability of finding a rhythm starting this week. That being said, I'm going to call it like the Revenge Tour soft launch, right? Like it's going to take a couple of weeks. This particular defense is very tough versus the pass. You're still kind of figuring things out in terms of the offensive system and scheme. Ladd McConkey is still kind of getting into the groove as well. I don't know if I expect a huge day through the air for Justin Herbert and the Chargers. I wouldn't be shocked, if Herbert kind of clicks and figures it out. And here come the bolts. Here comes the adjustments that Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman made in the bye week, and now we're throwing a lot. Like, I wouldn't be shocked to see that at all. But if I were the Chargers, I would approach this a certain way. Justin Herbert, maybe still a little bit, hobbled. I would say less hobbled and more just like, I don't think he's 100% on that ankle. I don't think he's going to remain 100% for the rest of the year, but he's more than capable of playing and helping the offense keep a rhythm, right? And I would say it's probably going to be another day of less than 200 passing yards, but it's really going to help the Chargers gain some momentum in other parts of the offense this week. But I do believe the passing game is going to be very important despite the tough matchup. Pat Surtain, to me, the best corner in football. The Denver defense has been really tough, but I think we're up to the challenge. And again, one guy I'm going to lightly mention in this video because I'm interested to see how it shapes out. If you guys remember, in the era of Keenan Allen, Keenan was just really good versus the Broncos. It didn't matter what the situation was or the quarterback was. It just felt like Keenan was always on, right? When we played Denver, whether it was in Denver or in LA. Very exciting. I want to see if maybe Ladd has the same sort of capacity coming in his rookie season, right? Ladd, by far, in my opinion, has been wide receiver one for this team. He's been awesome. I think he's been getting the most targets. I do expect that to continue. Let's see how that works out versus a division opponent. It's going to be especially tough. Once again, I have to imagine the Broncos are probably going to be putting Pat Surtain for the most part on Ladd McConkey. Very tough matchup. But again, just like we talked about with Joe Alt in week 1, right? Or even in week 3, if Joe Alt can go out there and handle himself versus a Max Crosby or a TJ Watt, we have something real in that player. And you know what? He excelled. He was incredible. Joe Alt is more than proven as a top tackle in the league at this point. He's insanely good, right? Ladd McConkey has some opportunities as well, right? This week versus Pat Surtain, in my opinion, the best safe or the best corner in football. Maybe we see something. And again, maybe not the biggest passing game for the Chargers, but maybe you do start something here. Maybe that trust and that chemistry that maybe was missed out on because of Justin Herbert's absence from training camp this last offseason. Maybe that does begin to build now, and we do see that Herbert and Keenan kind of relationship this time with Herbert and Ladd McConkey. I don't know. I'm hoping there's an opportunity here for Ladd that he does take, and we do see some impressive. Again, we don't have to see 100 yards and touchdown versus Pat Surtain, but just helping drive stay alive, picking up a couple first downs, scoring would be awesome, but just kind of helping out the offense, keep rhythm is what I'm looking for Ladd McConkey this week, which is especially tough versus the best corner in football. Thinking about the best DBs in football, welcome back one of my favorite players now of all time, in Derwin James. Bogus suspension last game. Sidelined him, and I think he would have made a huge difference versus Kansas City, man. I'm not even going to lie. He's coming back for this game. And again, Derwin James also pretty good versus the Broncos. I know at least a sack or two versus the Broncos, interception or two. This is a very important piece of this defense. And again, like I mentioned at the top of the video, feels like it's going to be a very defensive-oriented matchup anyway. Chargers are going to need all the help they can get on defense, right? It's not like Denver is posing a huge threat. You know, you got Bo Nix, you got Devontae Williams, you got a couple of good receivers, right? Like, they're okay. They're nothing crazy. But our ability not just to stop them, but shut them down will be a big reason why we win or lose this game. And I think the Chargers at this point, boasting the number one defense in the league in terms of points allowed, are up to the challenge. I think we can shut down the Denver Broncos, but we're going to need as much help as we can get. Derwin James is going to be a big part of that. I don't know how involved the Denver Broncos tight end game is, but Derwin will be a good weapon against that. But Derwin also playing up high. You see a lot of Bo Nix, at least in the last couple of weeks. He likes to be mobile. He does hit some big plays. Derwin out there being able to patrol up high, maybe even throw him in under, closer to the line, keep things contained, at the line of scrimmage with Bo Nix. Don't let him out. I think he's going to be a big part of the game this week. And one of the biggest reasons why I think Bo Nix and the Broncos are going to face their toughest matchup of the season in terms of defense. Derwin being back is a big part of that. Okay. But the biggest aspect to the defense that I think that the Broncos, again, especially for Bo Nix, welcome to the NFL kind of moment, is going to be the Chargers pass rush. Now, it's not like the Broncos haven't faced some good pass rushers this season. They faced off against Max Crosby, right, with the Raiders last week. They faced off against TJ Watt. I think they also played the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just like us, they've had some pretty, quality pass rushers on their schedule. I still think the Chargers, maybe outside of Pittsburgh, are the toughest that they've faced, not just because we have quality pass rushers, but we have a lot of them. And we have a defense that is clicking on all cylinders, right? Firing on all cylinders. Like, this defense is rocking, right? And behind Khalil Mack, who's got a pretty good track record versus Denver, I think it's going to be awesome despite whatever happens. Now, let's not rule out a Joey Bosa, who, again, at the top of the video I mentioned, is practicing individual drills, whatever. He does have, in my opinion, a shot to play this game. That would just make the situation for Denver even more detrimental in terms of pass protection. But even if that weren't the case, you still have Khalil Mack, who's been insane this season. You still have Thule, who's been amazing this season. You still have Bud, who logged 2 sacks versus Kansas City last time they played. Like, this team, as it's in terms of an identity right now, they feel like a very tough defensive team, very much so led by an insane pass rush. And that is something that, again, Denver has faced. They've been good at not allowing a lot of sacks this season as a whole, but they have struggled a little bit when it comes to teams with really quality pass rushers. For example, I think Denver's only allowed like 7 sacks this season, which is pretty good, right? But you take a look at where the sacks actually came from. It was versus the Raiders. It was versus the Steelers. So when you do go up against a team with quality pass rushers, they have struggled a little bit. And I would argue that the Chargers are among some of the best that they're going to face all season. Not to mention, I think, like I said at the top of the show, they have problems on the offensive line. We know they're on like their 3rd or 4th string right tackle. That is something you're going to see Mack and Thule and maybe Bosa all take advantage of at some point. Jesse Minter's going to know where to attack, right? I don't know. Denver's been good at protecting Bo, but again, they've struggled when the competition has been very good, and the Chargers competition is very good, right? I don't know, man. And the Chargers pass rush as a whole has been awesome. They've logged 11 sacks in 4 games, right? They haven't played that 5th game like a lot of other teams. 11 sacks in 4 games is very, very good. I wouldn't be surprised if they were a top 5 sack team in the league by the end of the season. It's going to be reflected in games like this week. And I think the Chargers, if I'm being honest, we said this in terms of an advantage, and it was very close versus the Steelers. I think the Chargers, even though we match up against them and we kind of mirror them very well in terms of tough defense and yada yada, I think the Chargers' biggest advantage here is going to be that offensive line. And I think that's going to help the Chargers offense gain a little bit more footing than what the Denver Broncos are going to have to work with all these pass rushers screaming. Defense has been fantastic. You got Derwin James back. It's going to be awesome. And we forced a lot of turnovers, by the way. When the defense is clicking, which they've been clicking more often than not, we've been forcing a ton of turnovers. I don't know how many forced fumbles, but I do know we have like 4 interceptions to, I think, 3 touchdowns. Or I know we have more interceptions than touchdowns allowed, right? That's awesome. And I do expect some of that in this week's game versus Denver. All right? Let's see. What did Daniel Popper just say? Ooh, Charger statuses. We just got some news. You guys want to go to Twitter with me real quick? Let's go. Let's pull an audible here. We just got some statuses from Daniel Popper. Ooh, here it is. All right. Game status. Out is Gus Edwards, Asante Samuel, and Jasir Taylor. Asante Samuel? Ooh, that's not good. I mean, we still got ourselves, again, I was going to say Christian Fulton, but he's also questionable. It's going to be interesting. Chargers going to have to figure some stuff out on defense. You're going to see some Tareeb still out there. I can guarantee that. Maybe even some Cam Hart. That's interesting. This is one of the first times this has been available during a recording, by the way. Kind of interesting. Questionable is Rashawn Slater. I do think he's going to play, but we'll have to wait and see. Nick Neiman might be back. That's huge for special teams. Joey Bosa is officially questionable. Okay. Interesting development right there. All right. And we'll take that in consideration as we continue on in the video. But yeah, that's pretty big. I would say the Asante Samuel one is certainly the biggest shocker. Okay, let's move on. The Chargers offense. And this has been a point where the Chargers fans, myself included, have been a little bit frustrated. We want to see more from the offense. We want to see Justin Herbert's talents utilized. We want to see points on the board. And they're still kind of figuring that out. But one thing that I do think they have firmly figured out right now is the Chargers run game. I do believe, yes, again, they struggled in the last couple of weeks. But you got to remember, man, like, it's been tough for J.K. Dobbins. He's faced 2 of the top 5 run defenses back-to-back in the last couple of weeks he's played. Kansas City's a top 5 run defense. Pittsburgh's a top 5 run defense. That's tough. And we didn't have our starting left and right tackle in the last matchup. I do believe when J.K. Dobbins has a little bit more space, the game script's a little bit more friendly, we got ourselves an awesome point of attack on offense. Now, despite the Denver Broncos defense being good, which I'm going to say again, they are very good, Denver is vulnerable against the run, okay? They've allowed over 100 yards per game, which those have been to teams that aren't necessarily known to run the football as much as the Chargers. Maybe the Steelers a little bit, and I think they logged over 140 yards. I think maybe the Seahawks a little bit, and they also logged over 140 yards. But outside of that, you got like the Broncos or the Raiders, right? They don't run the football pretty efficiently at all. Tampa Bay can sometimes on and off, but they're still figuring out who's going to be even RB1 out there, Bucky Irving or Rashad White. There's a lot of uncertainty behind a lot of the teams they've faced versus the run. But when they have faced a good running team, they've given up a good chunk of yards. The Chargers are one of the best running teams that they'll face this year. The only example that worries me in terms of the Broncos' opponents was Breece Hall. And I don't remember what the situation was there, but he got kind of shut down. I don't know if he was hurt or whatever. Outside of that game, though, if they faced a good running back and a good running team, they have been more so taken advantage of, gashed, right? And I think the Chargers are going to be very much so leaning in on that this week. We're going to call this segment Unleash the Hobdobbins. You guys will see my animation in the stream this weekend, I almost guarantee it. This all puts J.K. Dobbins in a very good position, right? You got 2 of the best tackles in football making their way back this week. Even if it's just one and Joe Alt, that's a huge help to a guy like J.K. Dobbins. Huge, huge help. It's even better if you got both because you can run both ways. They really don't have an idea of which direction you're going. But even having one is a huge, huge help. Big situation on the offensive line that's going to help him tremendously, right? I think Denver's going to really help J.K. Dobbins kind of get back on track after a really tough couple of matchups between Kansas City and Pittsburgh. This team's going to have to lean in on it. And I think, again, the Chargers are among the best run teams that Denver will have faced this year. I wouldn't be shocked if J.K. goes for over 100 yards. I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers as a whole go like 140, 150 yards this week. That's the angle that I would take, especially, with Justin Herbert and that passing game still trying to rev up a little bit. No need to force it. Let's get the guys open on the ground and see what we can make happen there. And I do think, just like we saw, kind of reflecting what we just read from Daniel Popper, there's going to be an opportunity for another running back this week to see some work, and that's going to be Kamani Vidal. This segment called Showing Vidal Signs. I know. With Gus Edwards now officially out, there's going to be a couple of opportunities out there for another Chargers running back to step in. Hassan Haskins, let's not sleep on him, the ex-Michigan running back. He may be the next guy up, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers start to finally unleash some of the later round rookies. Kamani Vidal could be a huge part of the offense in the future, guys. Maybe not RB1, he could be, who knows? But he's a really, really good archetype of running back for this offense. With Gus Edwards not really performing up to par, and not being available this week, it's going to open up, in my opinion, some opportunities for guys like Gus or for guys like Kamani Vidal to step in and try to make a name for themselves. I really have a good feeling that if Vidal plays this week, if he's active and he gets some snaps, we're going to see some quality play out of him versus even the Broncos, which I'm excited about. Again, it could be Hassan Haskins, who's also a very nice back to have out there if you're looking for some physicality, but it just feels like Kamani Vidal, I'm interested and I'm ready to see. And that also goes for another Chargers rookie in Brendan Rice, who we've not seen a lot this year. I wouldn't be shocked to see a little bit of him, maybe more so in favor of seeing Vidal this week, but I think it's kind of time to start unleashing a little bit of the late round. I know they like to develop guys and they want to give them time, ample time to settle in, but I think it's a good opportunity to start, seeing what we have in some of those later round rookies. With all that being said, Director, what do you think is going to happen in this game? Well, here is my Chargers-Broncos score prediction for y'all. I got the Chargers winning this one. Again, it's going to be kind of a slugfest. Chargers 20 to Broncos 12. Only 32 points scored in this game. Again, more of a defensive performance from both teams, I'd have to imagine. But one that really helps put the Chargers back on the map is, hey, they're figuring it out. A big test for the Chargers this week is going to be less so of, where are they at in terms of, injury and all that kind of stuff. That is very important. But more so, in my opinion, how did they adjust? Where did Jim Harbaugh go and say, hey, we didn't see, success doing this, or we had problems doing that? What are we going to do with some time to think about it, some time to adjust? What are we going to do now? And I'm excited because Jim Harbaugh is the kind of personality, the kind of coach that you do actually see some good adjustment, some good movement there. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers come into Denver and really have things, at least on the surface, more figured out and find themselves, in the win column again. With that identity of a tough defense and a really good run offense flourishing a little bit more this week. You could see them flip everything on their head and say, hey, we got to get Justin Herbert back up there as one of the top passers in the NFL. I wouldn't be shocked in the least to see something like that. But I also think that you're probably better chances of winning this game in particular is on the ground. I can see them finding ways to get J.K. Dobbins going. Should be a lot of fun. Well, guys, in the comment section below, let me know your score predictions and some of the fun predictions you think for this game. Do you think Kamani Vidal is going to play? Do you think the Chargers, despite missing some defensive backs, are going to log some nice, plays via the DBs, Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, who we have to wait and see. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been the Director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. Till next time, bolt up and stay frosty. And yes, this is a Chargers jersey. Happy Halloween. Ba-boom!